Hi guys, how's it going? In the previous set of videos that I've been covering on this particular unit, which is about Figma and learning UI UX, I've been talking about a Linkdr app. And in the previous video, I've covered something about frames. Now I did mention in the previous video that we're going to be learning something called auto layout, which is a specific part of Figma and particularly in frames, which I love and I adore. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating the same in the use case of the Linkdr app. Isn't that interesting? So we'll get started. We'll see what auto layout is. But before that, let me give you a quick introduction about the certification course that we have on UX. So we have been working on a course on UX and UI, which will involve Figma, which will involve understanding of user experience. And all of this is going to be giving you a certificate when you complete it successfully. We have this course which is available. The link is in the description. So with that done, let me get back to explaining what auto layout is and let's get started. So auto layout is exactly what it sounds like. When you design a frame in Figma, you can choose to give the elements a specific structure or a specific instruction so that every time that you do end up changing that frame, if at all, so that the elements can change and modify its position as well. If you have heard of responsive design, it is one of those use cases where auto layout is used generously. Now, the idea of auto layout is you place a certain constraints in terms of padding, in terms of spacing between different elements, and you let Figma or whichever tool you're using do the entire work. In Figma, you can do auto layout in frames only. You can't do that in sections, you can't do that in groups. So remember that, and every time that you do auto layout, you will see what are the particular categories or what are the particular specific dimensions that you might be able to modify. So let's get started. I do have this particular set of screens that I have created for the Linkdr app, which is the login and the sign up space, right? So if I just look at these elements, you can see that there is a logo, there's an artwork over here, there's some text, a set of buttons and a button over here, and again a simple text over here. Then in the second screen, we have the logo repeating, another text. There are two buttons which are sign in with Google and sign in with LinkedIn, a small divider. Then you have two text boxes where you can enter your email and password. And then finally another divider, and lastly a single line again. Now we'll end up recreating both of these from scratch, right? And I will explain you through the process of doing this, what auto layout is and how does it work. So to get started, let's first create a frame. I can do this by going over here, selecting a frame, and the frame that I do want to select over here is from one of these phone drop downs. I can select an iPhone 14 Plus because that's the one that I had been using all this while. So once I have this frame, let's rename this and call it intro. Okay, now I do have all of these icons that we have been using all this while, and I will use them again over here. So just dragging one of these copies over here in Linkdr. Then the artwork, I will copy this artwork right over here as well. Slight mistake, I need to copy it from the entire layer. Okay, great. Never miss an opportunity, and some text. So let's just write over here a text layer. With this, let's do this again. Never miss an opportunity. Okay, and this is good. Let's place it over here. Create a duplicate and swipe to file and apply it to jobs. So that is my duplicate, or actually duplicate and replica. And then we have three dots. So those three dots can be created by simple ellipses. So let's create something very small. We'll probably have it 5 by 5. Okay, and duplicate and then again duplicate. So I have these dots over here. Okay, done. Let's place them in the center, and a button which looks like this. So let's create a rectangle. Give it probably a purple color, something like this maybe. Okay, give it some sort of a rounded corners. So let's say this looks good, the max it can get, and log in. Then I have the button in the center, and new to linker sign up. That's the last piece of bit. That's the last layer that we need over here. New to linker sign up. Okay. So here I have all of the elements placed. Now all of these elements, they look very off. Of course, we can fix the font, and let's do that before moving forward. Make this bold. Something like this looks okay. Maybe somewhere over here. Swipe to find apply jobs looks okay. Maybe we can reduce the size a bit. That's okay. That's not what we are aiming for. All of these dots, ellipses can be slightly bigger. Maybe one of these can be from the same color. Okay. Maybe make this somewhat bigger. I think this is too big. Yeah, okay, this looks good. We'll fix the layout directly all in one go. So let's not worry about that. Just this bit has to be of a different color. So let's say something like this. Okay, great. So now I have this, all of these elements are placed over here. Now the thing with auto layout is that when you have a frame, or even if you do not have a frame, when you select an auto layout option, it ends up creating a frame by itself. Let's do a quick demonstration with just these three dots over here. Okay, so I have these dots, all of these are slightly messy, they don't have the proper structure. I can choose to do all of this, I can tidy it up, maybe distribute vertical spacing, it's okay, distribute horizontal spacing, and then we have it. But then again, maybe I can also group it, Control G to or Command G to group it, and I have a group that is created, and then I can move it along, and maybe I can just place it in the center, right? But what if I wanted to increase the space after this? That's not going to be easy, because then I will have to again change this, and then again select all of these, and then change select all of these, and then change the distribute horizontal spacing. It gets tedious, right? And wonder if you were creating an auto or a responsive layout, which shifts very dynamically from the web interface or mobile interface very easily, right? So that's something that's not possible, and that's where auto layout comes in. So once I have selected all of these three, I can right click over here and select add auto layout, or I can choose an auto layout button over here as well. Either one of those works. And once I do that, you can see that there are a couple of settings that I've opened up. Okay, so let's quickly talk about these settings before moving on. The first is the alignment of elements. So the first one is vertical layout, which means all of those elements will be placed vertically one after the other. So this, you see, has been replaced from a group to a frame, and now within the frame, I can, the current one that has been selected is horizontal layout, but see what happens if I select vertical layout. Not too difficult to understand, isn't it? So what this will end up doing is changing the element layout that is there. And then the next one is wrap. Of course, if the container is smaller, this might need a wrapping. So let's say if I have this and the container becomes smaller, you can see that this gets wrapped, and that basically means whatever does not get fit towards the end moves to the next layer. That's what that's what wrap does. Now I don't need wrap, let's just keep it in horizontal layout. Let's make the frame big enough so that everything is contained within it. The next set of things over here is this. The first is horizontal gap between items. Because we have a horizontal layout, that's why we have a horizontal gap. So you can choose to increase or decrease this gap. Then we have something called padding. Now we don't need padding in this, so we'll come back to this and the other one, the vertical padding and the horizontal padding later. But just look at this button, this set of buttons over here. So there are about 9 options. This one says top left, then you have top center, top right, align left, align center, and so on. So all of these are different variations. Now what this does is it defines where in the frame and how in the frame are these elements supposed to be structured. Do you want them in the top left, or do you want them in the center like that? Right? So currently we do have a frame which is hugging on both sides. Now it does not hug. We know that the elements are slightly smaller than the frame is available. So with this, if I do change these, you can see how just between the center alignment, this ends up shifting. So vertically we want it in the center, and horizontally we want it in the center as well. So this is what this wrap does. Now you remember what that hug thing that I just mentioned? That is the size of the container. Now in this case, the container, we have been ending up changing all of these, the size of the container over in all of these cases. But if we wanted to limit it, right, we do not want to have an extra amount of space over here. I have to go to the frame, this section over here, and choose the width and the height. So currently width and the height is supposedly as fixed, right? And you can see this 117 cross 44, that is the width and the height, and that has been fixed because that is something that we are working with. I can choose to set this as hug contents, and then this gets limited only to that particular set of elements which are inside it, and the frame will hug it, so it does not have a lot of different space. Okay, so this is a basic idea of what auto layout is. Let's play around with this somewhat more and see how we can use it or leverage it. Okay, so once I have this, let's set it in the center. And now with all of these things set, maybe I can just set up an auto layout for all of these together. So with all of the layers selected, let's add an auto layout, right? And okay, now you see what is happening. There is a wrap. First is something that I would want is a vertical layout. Keep them all in the center. Currently what's happening is you can see that this frame is slightly bigger, so I'd rather limit this frame in the center. I know that there is some sort of clipping happening, which is where this artwork is slightly bigger. You can see that this is the reason why the frame was made bigger by default. Now I have this artwork, I have this frame, I've made the frame such that it is in the center. I want it edge to edge, and that is what we will do right over here. Now I do see this login and this rectangle are in different places, so it ends up becoming modified. So let's do this. Let's select both of these and add an auto layout. So Shift A for this. You can see that this has automatically changed. Now you can see that the rectangle disappeared and the frame has become that rectangle as well, right? So that is what frames do. Frames ends up absorbing all of those properties of the rectangle, and you can see all of the settings that we had done. So the amount of the corner radius, that has also changed over here. So let's say we stick it somewhere back over here. Now what I would want to do is I want to give it some sort of a space, and that's what has happened over here. You can see that there is a horizontal padding and a vertical padding that has been added. Let's make the size slightly bigger, and let's say something like this. Now with whatever the settings of the rectangle and the text was, that has been absorbed in the auto layout, and you can see that the padding has been added. What is padding? Padding is spacing from different sides. So if it's horizontal padding, it means on the left and right side of the layer how much space is available. And if it's vertical padding, that means on the top and the bottom of the layer. So in this case, now I do have this layer login. Now this login has a padding of 53 pixels on the left and right side. So you can see that this small box, if I just increase it, you can see that the padding on the left one has become 117 and 53 on the right side. So you can have this padding shift. Now why does it matter? Because right now we have only a limited text, but what if we had a slightly longer text? So instead of login, so let's say just prior to that, if I have this at 29, instead of login, I had login to get started with linger, right? So now you see what is happening is that the frame gets limited because it had fixed width. If I had it to hug contents, you can see that the size changes. And now if I had any changes in the text, the button also ends up modifying itself, and it leaves that sort of padding on the left and the right side. So 29, I can reduce this as well over here, make it probably 0. So you can see that this will be edge to edge. But then again, that does not look nice. So let's stick it to a good number like 20. And similarly on the horizontal and vertical padding as well, let's stick it to 50. Right, so vertical padding is, if I did not mention this earlier, vertical padding is the space between the top and the bottom of the layer itself. Okay, so once this is done, this looks very ugly, so let's just keep it login to get started. Okay, great. I would want this to be fixed width, and let's change sorry, this to be fixed width, and let's make the size equivalent to this. Now the next thing about auto layout is the layout is created basis the layers that are over here in the panel. It will place all of those layers automatically according to where this layer is on the top and bottom. So if I move this layer underneath over here between the or below the frame number 3, so something like, if I move this frame 3 up, you can see that this auto layout also changes by itself. Correct? Isn't that neat? So once I have all of these things set, let's just call this button. This one are the dots. Okay, now I have all of this. Now what is happening? Probably because of this is not being in another frame, it ends up coming one after the other because that's how we have set it. So let's set it to auto layout by itself. And this one I would want it one after the other. Okay, great. Now the other set of things is the distance between elements. So what we have over here is this particular set, and we have set the vertical gap between all of the items at 40. Now I would want both of these to be slightly closer and not have different elements. So I can either group them and press Shift A so that I can make an auto layout, or I can just select both of them and select auto layout over here as well. Let's reduce the space between them, and they are not as independent as they were earlier now. Isn't that nice? Okay, so I think this looks very similar to what we had created over here. I think more or less this is what we had started off. Perfect. So this way we have created the first frame using auto layout. Why don't we get started with the next one? So next one is slightly more complicated, but it has more repeated elements. So I'm sure it will not be as difficult. You can see that now this time the element spacing is slightly different. So let's create a duplicate of this one, and I'll remove the other elements which I do not want. So frame 3, let's call this logo, remains there, artwork, dots, and Neotolinker sign up can probably still stay, and the login button can stay, because the login button we will use a different version of it. So to create sign in with Google, I will lose out on this. I will add a stroke right over here. Okay, great. And now within the button there was a text. Now this text will have to change its color. Let's choose a black color right over here. Now this is supposed to be saying sign in with Google. Let's change the text over here. Sign in with Google. Okay, there we have it. Is the first layer of text, and I have the icons right over here. Let's drag the icon, create a copy, and drop it right there. Right, so I think this looks somewhat similar. Now what is happening over here, because this button was on auto layout, on the horizontal side, everything in the center, there is horizontal gap between items, that is this space. I would want to add some sort of a vertical padding, but for that I need to make sure that the contents option is selected. Now I have slight more space on the left and right side, and a nice rounded number to start with that. So once this button is created, let's just call this sign in button. Let's create a duplicate of this duplica, if I was supposed to do that. And now let's bring in the other one. So we have this, let's place it over here. You can see that the other element also gets placed very nicely, very neatly. Isn't that nice? And let's remove the Google button from over here. Change this to LinkedIn. Okay, great. So 2 buttons, perfect. Now we have these options. Then what we would need is a divider. For a divider, I'll just end up creating a simple line from here all the way to here, which should be inside the frame after the second sign in button. Maybe change the color. So I can select this, change the line, change the color, make it somewhat gray. Easier one, okay. So all of this is getting set. Now the next option is the next part for us is to add these fields. So let's create a new box. Something like this, and say user email.com. Okay, we have this text. Okay, I do see that we need these icons over here, and let me just bring in those icons by using a simple plugin. Now I will talk about these plugins in one of the upcoming videos, but let's just bring in something for now. And I do have this plugin over here. We're going to be using icons 8, and let's call it email one. We have one, and we'll probably need one for password. Something like this maybe. Okay, we have 2 layers. So user@gmail.com is supposed to be an auto layout again, because this time I would want it to have another layer with it, which is the email icon. So add a stroke, add some sort of a roundness over here. Nice, 15 looks okay. The email, the icon is slightly bigger, so let's make this smaller. Let's make it about that size. I think 35 should be good. And then I place it inside. Okay, it's that funny game where you can't put it inside, so I'll put it directly from here. It's easier that way. Now with both of these things, okay, we have these. The email, probably the icon can be somewhat lower in opacity, 50%. And we have this right over here. Okay, so all of this is getting set. Let's add some sort of a padding right over here. This layer does not have to be this. Let's just call it hub contents. This is supposed to be, so let's just change it to fixed width and make it something like this. And reduce the corners. Okay, so there we have all of these elements. I do have a sort of spacing over here. So this, and add some bit of space between the elements like that as well. Okay, and this doesn't look as great as the other one. Maybe let's just see what are the other things which are over here. There is of course a shadow that we can come back to. There is a text layer. The icon and the text layer are both very close to each other, which is not the case over here. So if I just move this layer onto the left side, and now I can decrease the space between these elements. Started from the right side, from the left side, and now this looks somewhat better, doesn't it? Maybe reduce the size of this over here as well. So let's say 19, and reduce this size over here as well. Add a nice vertical padding for the entire thing. Looks way better, doesn't it? So this is what we have. We have created another input field, and this input field is input email, and we'll create a replica of this, a duplicate of this, and call this one input password. Now we know that this was about 28, and we'll change this to at 28 as well. Let's just push it inside the password next to the email. I will remove the email, change this one in terms of opacity, makes this at 50% opacity. Change the layer over here to say password. Okay, great. Our divider is supposed to come back again over here, so a duplicate of this, push right over here, probably this, and then new to LinkedIn sign up can come right over here. Okay, this looks better. This looks somewhat similar. Now the thing is, again, these elements are slightly far off because all of them are independent, but because the sign-in buttons are their own structure, so I can auto layout them and decrease the spacing between those elements. Something like this. Same thing is what I would probably do with these as well, and reduce the spacing over here too. Okay, now I think just for the visuals, we'd want these buttons to have the approximate size as this. So let's just select one of these sign in buttons and then make this somewhat wider. Okay, sign in button becomes as close as the other one. So these buttons are good, and then we have the other frame which is for the inputs, and now this, let's change it. Okay, let's just drag in the ruler over here to make sure everything is neat and tidy. Same for this one. Great. Perfect. Now this looks way better. Probably this is the time where we fix in the text over here. The text is supposed to be don't have an account, sign up. So just don't have an account, sign up. Okay. Maybe you can reduce the size of this text over here as well. And there we have a way better or a way structured design. So we can do a couple of more tweaks, maybe just add drop shadows for all of these buttons. So if I do add this frame, add inside the sign in buttons. So for both of these buttons, let's add an effect, drop shadow. This looks good. Maybe we can modify this somewhat. Drop shadow is over here. Increase this, increase the amount of blur as well, increase the size. Okay, this looks good. Same for these elements over here as well. Drop shadow, make it 14. This was I think about 100. And we have a clearer structure. Now maybe this element is something that I would want to move slightly higher in the entire frame. Now the thing is, that's something that is not as easy to do with auto layout, because auto layout will end up giving all of these things a similar structure. So if I want to do that, I will have to put all of these in a single auto layout or in a single frame, and then give more spacing between the text and these options over here. So with this, the first thing that I will do is select the buttons and the line over here, and maybe even the text over here, and set an auto layout. Now I can decrease probably the space right over here. Looks better. The spacing between over here and over here somewhat clear, right? And probably the text layer looks slightly off, so maybe I just add it from the top, add something like this, reduce the spacing directly from over here. So there we have that particular understanding, or those particular screenshots that we were trying to replicate. So auto layout essentially ends up modifying those elements depending on the frame width, the frame height, and the constraints that you have specifically defined. I hope that this was not too difficult for you to understand. So why don't you go ahead and try these by yourself. And in the next video, let's talk about something which makes the entire design more cohesive. I'm talking about styles. I'm talking about look and feels, how everything works together, because currently I know the text over here and the text over here, they look slightly off, and so does the text over here and text over here as well. Of course, maybe all of these structures which are going to be used again and again can be put into an easier format, and that's what Figma calls styles. We will explore that in the upcoming video. But in the meantime, make sure that you replicate this so that you can try and understand this slightly better. Make sure to like this video, share this with somebody you think needs to learn Figma, and subscribe to Design Hub for more upcoming content.